Okay, you've got 5 more minutes to finish this thing up. Okay, we need to get these things turned in now. Okay, final last call.
I was vaccinated.
Okay, as soon as I finish grading these, then we're back in session.
That was brutal. It's rough today.
The second one.
But I think his video.
I didn't screw up though.
I have no idea.
What did you get? 81?
No, I didn't have that anymore.
Yeah, I guess those songs.
Oh, I'm way off on that.
You got one wrong. No.
I think other than the exam, I haven't done that was the worst grade I've done.
You guys are bonus wrong.
Oh, no,
Because you did, you got
Sometimes it's stressed out.
I messed this one, I butchered this one. I can tell just by looking at the notes. No, it's gonna be.
No, the next one we all gotta like. Yeah. Like at a 90 or 100 on that.
I just want to know who's doing really well.
I could be wrong. Feel good, except for maybe 2 or 3 of them, so I got that.
Yeah, right?
get credit treatment with the term, I mean, the term doesn't have how many days, just payments.
Yeah, I got
Divided by the interest rate. Are those supposed to be a coin? Really? The one about the zero interest, 15,000, wouldn't it be 15,000 divided by 0.06?
Okay, all done with the gradings. Thanks, Rick.
Oh.
Where's Quincy?
So that messes up eight.
Erica, Steven,
I mean, I knew 9 was wrong, because she had a monthly payment of like $80,000.
and
But I put it anyways, just.
okay.
Holy crap.
All right.
It's not as bad as I thought. I don't know, I think I might have crumpled up my notes, right? But.
Is that iPad still dead?
Oh, shoot. 2,700. Which one did you get right? So I only got the answer. You only got 5. 7. Did you get 5?
Yeah, 5.
Okay, there's distribution. This one was definitely a little more challenging on purpose. You know, this material is a little bit more challenging. Okay. Now, keep in mind, I did bump it up, gave you an extra bonus, you know, choice. And then the nice thing with the bonus, it was the question that we just worked.
Yeah.
So all you had to do was copy down the answer. Okay? So, and then the whole motivation behind that was, no, there was a method to my madness. Because I knew that some people were going to be worn out and they were going to stop writing down what I was writing down on the board, and as a result, this was payment to those people who took the effort to write it down.
I just have a question about 10.
Yep.
We were comparing our answers.
Okay, let me give you the answers.
Well, no, we have the right answer. We just times it by the 60 months for 10. And we got the total amount that the grandfather or whatever was paid, not the month. We have the monthly
Yeah,
amount.
monthly is all you need.
Oh, but it just says what payment will he receive?
No, yeah, monthly payment. Just like we worked on the board.
Wait, but I asked you month or year, so you said month.
No, I said it is a month.
No, I said at the end of the 5 years, you said
That's you
month.
timed it.
Payment,
You
it's
timed
always
it
gonna
by
be
the
like
month.
payment.
I thought you were asking in the month.
Okay, wait, if I have the month right, can I get that point back?
Oh God. I definitely don't get it.
Because I asked.
I don't want to. I want to wrote this down.
You give her that point, can you run it out? Really quick pain, is that really what was possible? You're right, that's what caused this. Oh my
I did 2 5 times and still got the same answer.
No. I thought it would be. So I put
Okay, so here are the correct answers. Here are the correct answers. Obviously, that's for the bonus.
I don't know if we'll have time, but is there, can we go over like how you got the answers?
I just wrote down below the right way.
Can you go over to start?
Why are you payment for to get the right information?
Because it has to, it's sort of like it has to complete that process. And,
That's what happened. I didn't click payment.
and I made a point of saying that earlier, that you've got to make sure that you solve before you start.
Oh.
Okay, all right. There are the correct answers. All right. Now, let's do this. Let's go ahead and start with the third part of the material. Honestly, and I'm not joking, I actually did soften up the third part of the material. So it's actually only a couple of calculations and the rest is conceptual. Okay? So if you just pay attention, you're going to get the majority of the third quiz right. Okay? Amazing.
Times it by 6. That would be 100.
This is
Okay.
that's like, oh no.
5.047%. Okay, yep. Yes, yes. You have to initially solve before you can. Correct. Correct.
I get 100 on the next one. That's what I want to do.
It's the same answer.
I'll give the same
No, I don't this one.
I times it by 6 instead of just.
I did the same thing, 81,658.
Yeah, I guess you were monthly.
I think we should get points.
Oh.
Okay, all right, let's move forward.
Professor Courtney, real quick. On number 10, it says what payment?
It is monthly payment, just like we worked in class. Just like we worked in class.
For 9, I got 1480.44. Is that maybe that?
I got it. So I'm sitting.
Okay, let's move forward.
I didn't write down.
5? Well, you mean number 5? Yeah, number 5. How'd you do it? 15,000?
All right. Okay, let's move forward. We got stuff to cover.
Alright, let's go.
All right, so. All right. Now, adjustable rate mortgages. What we're going to do is we're going to have actually 1, 2, 3, 4 problems. 6 out of the 10 are purely conceptual. Okay? So, once again, all you have to do is pay attention.
Awesome.
All right. So, well, I'm sorry, but the battery's dead. I'll recharge. Well, it's your recharge.
Plug it up to the socket. You can use this socket. Is your Apple, do you have your, turn it on airplane mode, because you're not really like using the internet, you're just kind of writing on it.
Put a stitching cord.
Well, let's see if it's charged. I actually charge it.
If it has a little.
Yeah, it's up to 8%, so it's going to die again. So, okay.
Does anyone have an Apple cord, the charger?
All right, let's move forward. All right, so with the adjustable rate mortgages, handful of things to sort of point out. What is an adjustable rate mortgage? It is a mortgage in which every so often the interest rate is going to change, okay? It could be that that interest rate changes monthly, could change every 6 months, could change every year, could change every couple of years, every 5 years. That totally is dependent upon the lender and the loan agreement. I would say 90% of the time, the majority that I have seen have tended to change every month, okay? As rates change, they sort of go up and down, but once again, every one of them is a little bit different. Now, typically, to come up with what the rate is going to be, the rate that we typically refer to is this composite rate. And that composite rate is equal to an index rate plus a margin rate. Now, what is an example of the index that might be used? Because there's more than one that may be used. Okay. LIBOR? Possibly. What else? Your book actually mentioned several. Federal funds rate, possibly. Also, maybe even in some cases, a consumer price index, depending on the kind of adjustable rate mortgage it is.
Barclays 200.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a whole variety of different base indices. Now, normally, well, what is this? This is basically, it kind of represents the floor. Okay, the base rate that a bank is in most cases able to get their funds at, and that is kind of the floor. So this is usually what their cost of funds as a lender is typically going to be. Okay. Now, in addition to that index rate, the local bank will set their own margin rate, which is effectively what it sort of sounds like. It's like their profit margin. And they're sort of saying this base rate or index rate might be, let's say, 3%, but on any adjustable rate mortgages that we do, we're automatically going to tack on a fixed margin of 2%. Regardless of what this index does, we're going to still get our 2% in terms of our money as the local lender. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so ultimately those combined on a very basic level comprise what is called this composite rate, or the actual rate that you get charged at that particular moment in time. As this rate fluctuates, once again, could be once a month, could be once every 6 months, once a year, then as this goes up or down, then obviously this is for the most part going to stay constant, so this is what is ultimately going to change.
Yeah, just something I never understood is the index rate. So you say that's the cost of funding for the
Well,
bank. So why?
that's a simplistic way of trying to understand it. It's effectively, from the lender's perspective, how much their money is really costing them. And it could even be to a certain, I mean, you know, you could sort of say if they have local deposits and they're going to use those to actually lend out, then it would be effectively what they're having to pay out on those deposits, plus whatever, once again, profit margin they want to earn above and beyond.
They get credit to loan you money?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, I mean, once again, banks aren't usually 100% equity. They're borrowing their funds from other sources, whether it's from deposits or other, you know, loans they've made or treasuries, whatever it is that they've done. So they do have a cost of funds, and that is typically, though, what this will be based on.
Unless it came from their liquid assets or whatever, which it doesn't.
Right. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Can you elaborate a little more on the margin rate? Is that?
The margin is really, it's more of them sort of saying, what's our cost of doing business and what sort of profit do we want to earn on, you know, each loan as a percent. And this could be maybe in some cases as low as like 1%, could be as high as, you know, 2 or 3%, but usually not much more than that.
Would it, another way of calling it, would that be like a fixed spread that they're trying
Yeah,
to achieve?
the spread is another way to
But it's
sort of.
fixed throughout the time.
Typically, this stays fixed. I mean, doesn't absolutely positively have to stay fixed, but as a general rule, yes. And it could also be that this, in some cases, going back to, I think, Claudius's comment earlier, this could fluctuate to a certain extent based on the risk profile of the borrower. Okay? In some cases. Loosely, what you need to understand is simply that there is some sort of a base rate or index rate added to some sort of a profit margin for that, and that gives us this overall composite rate, which is the rate that really matters to you as the borrower as to what it is you're going to be paying. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, yep.
The margin rate, I think, and I'm trying to rewind it in my brain, but they have a little clause on the actual loans that say it cannot exceed a certain amount over the.
You're stepping ahead of me.
You have an
That was
hour.
literally my next statement. Okay, is what is put into place in the loan documents will be basically what are the yearly caps and the lifetime caps for whatever the rate might be overall. And so they may say, we're going to start you out at 5%, but we're going to put maybe an annual cap on that rate to where it can only go up by 1% per year. Okay? So even if this thing goes crazy and just goes to 7% or something like that, your rate can only be increased by 1% each year until it effectively caught up with whatever that rate is. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a protection from your standpoint as the borrower that you sort of know that you're going to have potentially this annual cap. Also, they will typically put in there a lifetime cap. And that lifetime cap might be 5% over and above what you started with. So if you started with 5%, the maximum that your interest rate could ever be would be 10%. Does that make sense? That's, lifetime just simply means over the life of the loan.
Well,
It can never go higher.
It can never go higher than
I
that.
thought you meant when the person had died.
Yeah, so in other words, here's what could happen. So let's say that we've got composite rate in this column, we've got index rate plus margin rate, and we sort of say, as we started out here, this was 5%, this was 3%, this is 2%, and let's say in the next year, this went up to 4%, this stayed at 2%, now you're going to be at 6%. Okay, well that fits within our annual cap of 1% increase. But what would happen in the event that this were to go up in 1 year instead of going from 3% to 5%? Then that means that your composite rate would be 7%, but you could not be charged that because of the cap, so you would only be charged 6% because of the 1% cap. Does that make sense?
So the lender will actually make nothing if it goes to 6%.
Right. Okay?
For that year. And then
Right.
They can catch up later.
Right, and they can catch up to that maximum cap of, let's say, 5%. Now, you can also have the flip side of that, which is a floor, okay? So cap is obviously the high end, the floor is the low end. How low can it go, kind of thing, all right? And so there, you can have a situation of where, once again, this goes from 3% down to 2%, which would mean your composite rate would be 4%, which is what you would charge. And the lender could say the base floor for not only for 1 year, but for a lifetime might actually be, 4%. Okay, they're gonna probably be a lot less generous on the downside than they would be potentially on the upside. All right, any questions on that? Make sense? Okay, now the thing is, the cap, for the most part, is going to be based, on the rate, but it also could be the payment. They could even, sort of say, the payment cannot exceed X number of dollars. Okay?
Wait, so is the cap, is it only annually? They don't do like a monthly, like if it goes up in a month?
They could. I mean, but most of them are going to be on a yearly basis as to when they're, it's going to be put into place. I mean, even though it may be changing, month to month, it's typically kind of on an annual basis where they're going to review everything. Okay?
And that index rate varies with the period of the loan as well, right?
Right.
5, 10, 15.
Right. I mean, once again, one of the first mortgages I had, every single month, my payment was different. I mean, it would go from, let's say, $1,000 a month to $1,200, and the next month be down to $800. So it's one of those sorts of things that depending on how variable the market is at that particular point in time, can make a huge difference in what your payments are. Now, the thing that gets people in trouble is obviously in a rising interest rate environment. We haven't had that in a while, obviously.
Sounds like it's coming.
But it's probably coming. And what we've had is kind of a declining interest rate environment, which has been great, for adjustable rate mortgages, because for you as a borrower, because you can lock in, get a great rate, and unless the rates go back up, you're getting a good deal. But here's what tends to happen, and what happened like in 2005, 2006, that general vicinity, is there were an awful lot of adjustable rate mortgages that were being issued with very significant, what are called teaser rates. Teaser rates. So teaser rates are introductory rates that entice you in or tease you in to actually closing the deal. So let's say that normal rates in the market, the normal rate for a loan might be 8%. They might offer you a teaser rate of 2% for the first year. Well, what's that going to do? That's going to bring you into that loan, give you this heck of a rate with a really low monthly payment, and then 12 months later, your payment's going to probably jump up to this rate. Okay, is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing for you as the borrower, because look, let's do the simple math. $100,000 loan for 30 years at a 2% interest rate, so the monthly payment is there, versus a $100,000 loan for 30 years at an 8% interest rate. So what are the numbers we get?
369.62 cents for the first.
369?
0.62.
Okay.
Second one, 733, 76.
Okay, so how would you, as a borrower, like to go in, get a loan for $369 a month, only to find out, literally 12 months later, this is going to be your new monthly payment? Are you going to be able to afford that? Probably not, because once again, you have been qualified based upon that.
Is that like when
It's predatory lending at its worst. Yeah.
Is that like when they do the refis and they give you the 90-day window, and then it bumps up significantly? Is that the same concept?
It's similar, yeah.
Or when the lease goes up?
I mean, the whole idea, think about this like this. Okay, let me try to give an example here. Let's say we kind of work backwards on this. All right, what's the percentage now for residential? That's not my thing. So what percentage percentage of income, of gross income? 33%.
30 to 40.
Let's just go with 30%. Okay, 30%. So this is basically, so we take this times 12. So 369, 62 times 12 is 44, 35, 44, all right? And if we're saying that you can use up to 30% of your gross income to qualify for a loan, for residential that is, then we would basically be saying, okay, let's take this, divide that by 0.3, okay? And that's going to give us, that can't be right, okay, 14,784.80, okay? Over here, $88.05, 12 divided by 30%. $29,000. 350, 40. So the point, as you can see, that just based on that, you'd have to have twice the amount of income to qualify for that loan on the right-hand side than the one on the left-hand side, all due to that change of interest rate. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, any questions about that? Yep.
Why did you divide the 4435 by .30?
This is the percentage of gross income
Oh, that's right, 30.
that you can spend, assuming this is your gross income, this is how much you can spend on your mortgage, that's the mortgage. Or the debt service.
So
Okay?
that last number is like the amount of income you need to make to take
Correct.
out that much of the loan.
Correct. No, per year.
Yearly.
Right,
Oh, yeah.
with that amount of interest.
So that's a good, good income for one.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, any questions about that? Make sense?
Stone erasing.
Okay?
Oh, divide by 4. No.
Yeah, but if you have the loan capacity for
That's
the,
right.
for the 8%, right, you can just go in, if you know it, you can just use the loan and and add 8%. You can go into that kind of loan, and just get this guy first year.
Right.
Just don't go in.
Right, no, absolutely. But the problem is, the lenders, these predatory lenders, the whole idea behind it is they want to qualify these people that are not qualified. Here's the thing. The thing that you got to focus in on here, this is predatory lending, okay? In the sense that what is happening is you're taking somebody that basically is earning $15,000 a year, and you're telling them, oh, you can afford a $100,000 mortgage. Well, you can, as long as the interest rate is 2%. But you know that 12 months from now, that person is going to be hit with this new mortgage that they're not going to be able to afford on $14,000, but they would have needed to have had double that income to afford. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is part of why we had the previous crisis in the 2006, 2007, 2008 time period, because all of these lenders, predominantly mortgage brokers, okay, who are not necessarily tied to a specific bank, but are more independent operators that are simply taking in loan documents, processing those loan documents, and then sending them off to faulty underwriters that ultimately would allow these loans to happen. Does that make sense? Okay.
Were the borrowers told that it's gonna go up or not?
They don't.
They were
Most of
deciding
the,
they
no,
wanted
no,
a
two things.
Oh,
They're unsophisticated folks. Chances are, if you're earning $14,000 a year, you're earning a minimum wage sort of job, and you're not that sophisticated. You're just being told, yeah, I can afford a $100,000 house. I'm so excited. You follow? Okay. All right. Now.
They can go to grad school like us.
Okay. So let's do this. Let's work through a couple of problems. Oh, one more. Well, I guess one more little conceptual thing. Okay. So one of the topics that was discussed, in addition to adjustable rate mortgages, were price level adjustable mortgages, or price level adjustable mortgages, PLAMs. PLAM. And a PLAM specifically uses something like the Consumer Price Index to ultimately reset the value of the loan at the end of each year. This is a crazy deal, okay? What would happen is a lender, and most of the time, let's once again get back to the whole retail perception. What is going to pull you in the door as an unsophisticated borrower? Cheap upfront perceived cost, okay, in the sense of low interest rate, yes? You're walking down the street, you've got 10 different lenders all around you, they've all got signs outside saying, here are our current lending rates, and you see this one has 2%, this one has 3%, 4%, whatever. Which one are you going to stop at? The chances are the one that has the lowest possible rate. stated, yes. If you're an unsophisticated borrower, all right, they know that. They're going to pull the customers in with that really low introductory rate or stated rate, but there are going to be some little caveats. Well, this is where the price level adjusted mortgage sort of comes into play, the plan. The way this one works, they offer low interest rate up front. Okay? Overall on the loan. But what happens is they typically will offer these in a increasing price environment for properties. So typically offered when market is improving. In other words, prices are going up. What they do is they readjust the loan balance at end of year. So in other words, what will happen is you will go through paying your mortgage of 2% interest for a year. All of a sudden at the end of the year they say, okay, the consumer price index for this year rose by 3%, or housing prices rose by 3%, so your ending balance of your loan at the end of that first year, we're going to increase it by 3%. You follow? Does that make sense, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so if you had, I mean, without any sort of pay down, just to make sure you're following my logic train here, your balance at the beginning of the year was, let's say, $100,000. You might have paid down a little bit, but they're just sort of saying, okay, at the end of the year, assuming a 3% effectively consumer price index growth, we're going to say your new loan balance is $103,000. So you start the second year with a loan balance of $103,000. Do you follow? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. It is, but it gets the customers in the door. Because what you're really doing is, to a certain extent, indirectly, you are tying the, in other words, you as the lender are capturing the price appreciation of the home or of the property. Does that make sense? I mean, think about it. I mean, theoretically, the home was worth this at the beginning of the year. If it truly is worth this at the end of the year, it's not you as the borrower that's going to get the increase in the event that you sell it. It's going to be the lender getting that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's legal?
Of course it is.
All of
I agree with this.
All of this stuff is legal, man.
Okay. This is scratches the surface. Okay. Yeah. Why do you think there are so many consumer protection things out there whenever it comes to lending practices? Because it's brutal. It's just brutal. Okay.
What kind
Now,
of credit score do you need to get a loan like that?
not very high. Not very high. Not very high. Okay. All right. Let's move on.
Not very high.
I was just wondering on Alaska.
That's the same way, because then if the decrease means you're still paying.
You had no problem.
Actually, hypothetically, if the value goes down, you're still, you still pay them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just the lender is kind of taking the risk that the market's going to continue to go up for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, but so if the property values go down, they have to readjust it down.
Yeah, they do.
And plan.
Well, unless they built in a floor that keeps it from going.
Most likely.
Yeah. There's always, I mean, here's the thing. You've got to understand, there are some very intelligent folks that sit around in these financial institutions that come up with these schemes. Okay, they get paid a lot of money to come up with these things. I mean, we're talking, folks that get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just to come up with convoluted new products that basically very few people understand that they can ultimately introduce into the market and pull people in. You have to understand that. I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's what happens. Okay?
Like you heard about those two guys that got arrested for playing around with LIBOR rates.
Well, I mean, that was.
Okay, let's move forward. We got a couple of problems to work through, and then we can do our quiz, and we'll, it's going to take us a while to get through these. All right. So, in this case, let's say that we've got a 20-year loan. I'm skipping around on purpose on this one because I'm giving you some easy questions. Okay? What?
What is that?
I'm skipping around.
Okay.
Okay? We've covered the conceptual stuff, now we're doing problems. Okay? Alright, so we got a 20-year loan, $100,000, and the interest rate for year one is going to be, let's say, 4%. For year two is going to be 5%, and for years 3 to 20, let's say, is going to be 6%. Calculate the lender's yield on this loan. Okay, so here's how we're going to approach this. Okay, and in this particular case, we're going to make this annual, just because we keeps it simple. Okay, so drawing our timeline here for a second. And okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and onward. Okay, so for year one, we're going to have this 4% interest rate. For year two, a 5% interest rate, and then for year three, all the way out is going to be the 6% interest rate. Does that make sense conceptually?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So every time, and this is okay. This is one of those key things that you've got to put in the back of your mind in terms of, you've got to remember this. When you're dealing with adjustable rate mortgages, every single time the interest rate changes, you need to treat it as if it is a brand new loan, okay, for calculation purposes. And you need to make the adjustments accordingly to deal with that.
So this would make monthly really hard to calculate.
Yes, that's why I chose to do it annual.
Every single
Right,
month.
exactly. This is why we're going to save that for the spreadsheet part. Okay. So, how do we do this? All right, we start off, the first piece, 100,000. And once again, this is one payment per year. Okay, and 20 years is the term. Interest rate, 4%. Let's get our monthly part, our annual payment for that. Once again, this is annual payment.
7,358.
Yep. So our annual payment is $7,358 and let's say 18 cents rounded. Okay? Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put that in up here just so we kind of keep track of it. So 73.58. So that's pretty much going to mean that our next payment is going to be higher than that. Yes, because obviously a higher interest rate. But in order to get there, this is the part you're going to hate because of all the steps we have to go through to get there. We're going to fill up the rest of the chalkboard with this, okay? All right, so the first thing we have to do is we have to figure out what is the balance at the end of that year, okay? Which is just 1 year, but we still have to find out what the balance is. So we're going to do input 1, because this is annual, okay? Okay. I'm just going to shortcut this a little bit with the 3 equals there. Okay.
96,640.
1, input 1, shift, amortize, equal. All right.
That's the end of year one, correct?
Yes. 96,641.82. Okay. So that is our balance at the end of that first year. Does that make sense? Yes. No, possibly could be. All right. Now, what we have to do, as I said earlier, with an adjustable rate mortgage, every single time that the interest rate changes, we have to treat it as if it's a new loan. So now we're going to basically start over. Okay? We're going to clear all.
Can't you just do PV?
You don't want to do it, trust me. Much easier to do it this way. Okay, so what you're going to do, you're going to come down and you're going to say 96,641.82 is going to be our new present value. And this is the reason why you don't want to do that. Because our term is no longer 20 years, it's now 19 years.
You end up changing all the values.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't want to make that mistake. So now we've gone down to where we're now to 19 years. Our interest rate has also changed to 5%.
What's the question?
And then we calculate the payment for that component, okay? So let's do that.
799662.
Okay, just double check you. Okay. 7996.63. Still got?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So now what do we have to do? We have to calculate the balance at the end of that year. Okay.
1-1 still?
Yep. Still 1-1 because remember we're sort of starting over. Okay.
33477.
Okay. Okay, 93,477.28. Okay, so now what happens? Start over again. Okay, clear all. We put in 93,477.28 as our new present value at 18 years with our new interest rate of 6%. Get our monthly payment.
8632.
Okay, 8633.24. Okay, now that pretty much takes care of the heavy duty stuff. We still got a long way to go. All right. So everybody comfortable with what we've done up to this point? Yes or no? Okay. Now we have to calculate what the lender's yield is off of this. Okay. So this is where we have to convert this into a cash flow stream to the lender. All right. So what you're going to do is we're going to start over, clear all. All right, and then the initial amount the lender disperses is what? 100,000, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Now the cash flow that they receive in the first year is simply that first payment amount of 73,58,18, correct? Which they receive for 1 year in total. The second payment they receive is the 79,96.63 for year 2, and then for year 3 and beyond, it's 86,33.24. Now that cash flow exists for how many years? Well, if obviously the first two are taken out in 20 years total, then it's going to be 18 years that they're going to receive that cash flow. So we're going to need to put in 18 shift n sub j, okay? Then what you're going to do at that point is simply solve for what is the internal rate of return, or in essence, what is the lender's yield?
I just wanted to know what was.
Okay, all right, so let's just see what we get.
18NJ.
N sub J, which is below the CFJ button.
No.
You're gonna pay the
18 years.
You're gonna
You're
pay
paying it for 18 years.
You're gonna pay that last
Well, why
amount
isn't it 17?
every year at the end, because the first
Okay.
one, because it's the remaining of the.
This one is 1, this one is 2, you have
Oh, because you're
effectively.
counting for it, okay.
Okay, got it.
I get 5.66. Okay? And if you think about it, that makes sense because, I mean, obviously our initial rate was 4%, went up to 5%, but the majority of the payments are being made at 6%. So for it to be 5.66, that would make sense.
Is that like the average?
It's like a weighted average, basically.
Yeah.
But that's like their yield?
I'm sorry? That's their yield. That is the lender's yield. It's also, from your perspective as the borrower, your effective cost of borrowing. So this would be the equivalent, this 5.66 would be the equivalent of you having gotten a fixed rate mortgage for 5.66. Make sense?
Since we learned about calculators here, why are these separate than the phone? Like, why are they inverse? Is there actual?
Why are they what?
The buttons, how come they're inverse from a phone? They're flipped upside down.
Calculator design.
I have no idea.
Wait, what?
Don't listen to that.
Okay, moving forward.
I mean, because I was just using it as a phone and I was putting in all the wrong numbers. That's why I.
Once again, another you problem, not a me problem. All right, let's
Oh, you
see.
mean like in,
You know what I'm talking about over there.
Okay, let's do an assumable mortgage.
What?
An assumable mortgage.
so that was.
All right.
What do we do with composite rate? What do we do with composite rate?
You know why the keyboards are quarter keyboards? Because when they had typewriters, the buttons would hit if you, so it was meant for speed. If you had it in alphabetical order, the keys would actually
Okay.
What was the guy's name?
hit.
All right. So one of the things that I know that you guys discussed, because I remember hearing a little bit of it whenever I was listening in on one of San Miguel's lectures, and he was talking about assumable loans. They exist, sometimes more informally than formally. And what I mean by that is there are an awful lot of people out there that will go and they will get a mortgage on whether it's a house or in a building, and they will get a really good rate on that property. And then whenever they're ready to sell it, maybe a few years later, they have maybe got this incredible interest rate that is well below market for whatever reason, and then they will work out an arrangement, maybe with a prospective purchaser, to do what is referred to as basically a contract for deed, which is in essence a form of seller financing. And what you can do with that is potentially give the prospective borrower, the new purchaser, if you will, a below market interest rate, okay? Not saying this is something you should do or you shouldn't do. I'm saying it gets done, okay? So what specifically may happen is, let's say that you got this loan and your loan was at 3.5% for 20 years. 5 years later, rates are at, let's say, 6.5%, okay, for 15 years. This loan that you've got at 3.5% has real value to it because you're locked into that rate for the next, 15 years, okay? I mean, you've already gotten 5 years of loan value out of it. Now you are going to sell it, and whoever you sell it to is potentially going to get the remaining 15 years of value out of it. Well, I'm sorry?
Like your grandfather did.
Right. So now Quincy, you had a question or a comment, I know.
I tried that twice, this was single family homes, both times the lender called the loan.
And I was about to say, what will happen in some instances is if the lender becomes aware of the situation, then they will immediately call in the loan and you're out of luck.
Oh, you were not supposed to do that.
I had to take a private loan.
And it all depends, once again, on where your sourcing of financing comes from. Sometimes you're already getting maybe owner financing from someone else, and then you're just simply passing it along to yet another person, okay? Once again, I'm not advocating this, I'm just simply saying it exists and it gets used quite often, and it gets used quite often, especially in lower income sort of properties where many people have difficulty actually getting the loans themselves because maybe they're living from paycheck to paycheck or whatever. And so it's like you get someone who's credit worthy to get the loan and they take on the risk and then pass on effectively the benefits of that loan that they were able to achieve to someone else. Does that make sense? Okay. Any thoughts, questions, observations on that? Okay, now, so let's sort of look at how this potentially works in terms of what the real value creation is. So once again, we take our $100,000 loan, and in this case, let's go ahead and make it 12 payments per year. And we're going to start out with a 3.5% interest rate, and that's going to be for 20 years. And we're going to get, what is our monthly payment for that? Okay, so let's start that out. Seems simple enough to begin with. Okay, 579.96. Okay, so as we said, we're going to hold on to this loan for 5 years. Yes?
Yes, sir.
So we need to find what the balance is going to be at the end of 5 years. So 1, input, 60, shift, amortize, equal, equal, equal. Let's get our balance. Okay, so 81,126.57. Okay, everybody good with that? Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to take that amount, the 81,126.57, and we're going to put that in as our present value here, and we're going to put in 6.5% as our interest rate for 15 years. Now let's see what that gives us.
Do we have to clear off?
You probably should, yeah. Okay, and we end up with a new payment of $706.70 rounded. Okay, now the value creation comes in between those two. Okay, so what's the difference between the two? Okay, so 706.70 minus 579.96. A month, yes. 126.74 a month. Now, and this lasts for 180 months.
22,813.
So 22,813.11. Okay, everybody good with that? Yes or no? All right. So in just simple cash savings of the monthly payment alone, not doing any other funny stuff. Just simply looking at cash savings. By allowing this person to assume your loan, you're really giving them $22,000 or almost $23,000 of hard cash money savings. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
Yes.
Could you technically, you can sell the property for more because you're creating an investment?
That's the idea.
Okay.
Or you can simply, could say, all right, I'm going to let you buy this property from me. I am going to be the lender. I am going to charge you 6.5%, where I'm going to only be having to pay the bank 3.5%. And so you would be able to get an extra 22 grand out of the deal. And you're saying, well, why would the new borrower agree to that? Well, because you may not require any sort of documentation, you may not require any sort of surveys, any sort of appraisals, any other kind of paperwork. It's pretty much like a no-doc loan from their perspective. And so,
It's like a sublease, basically.
yeah, in essence, it's really what it
And
is.
then at the end of the 20 years, that's when the deed changes. Basically.
Exactly. That's why it's called a contract for deed, in the sense that at the end of this term, at the end of the 15 years, then the deed would be handed over, kind of thing.
Now,
How about the equity that's already in the
Okay,
property?
good question. Okay, so the equity piece, this roughly 20,000 here, they would have to either come up with out of pocket, or they would have to borrow that money either from somebody else, or you could just roll the whole thing into this loan.
So you can basically give them 100,000?
You could.
Okay.
Exactly. Which would only increase the amount of money that you would ultimately have coming into yourself. I mean, if you just went ahead and just did that real quickly, so 100,000 at 6.5%.
871, I didn't clear it.
What was it?
871, I didn't clear all that, I just had the present value.
Okay, so you're saying 871, so let's just say 871 minus 579, so, you know, almost, what is it, like 192 maybe? Is that right?
Yeah.
So $192 a month times 180 months would be what?
That's pretty close to 30.
How much did you get?
34,000.
Two,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
290.
oh, 290, I'm sorry, my bad. Okay, 292 times 180 is what?
52,560.
52,5, what? Okay.
it's nice.
Wait,
Yeah.
I don't understand what that number is though.
Okay, so this is, okay, over here,
Bless you.
this is assuming that we allow them to assume the existing loan with the existing mortgage balance of only 81,000. But they need to pay us the full value of the property, or the 100,000. And so they're gonna have to come up with that money either through another lender, or through cash, or we go ahead and give them a full loan of the entire.
So if you add that number to the 81, should you get the 100,000?
If you add basically, if you subtract out the 81,
It's what you already paid your first.
this is
5
your
years.
equity.
It's what you put in already. So you
In
only
other words,
cover-
what's left over here, the, whatever this is, 19,000, blah, 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 that's your equity in the property.
He needs to find.
Does that make sense? And so this is the amount that ultimately the new purchaser is gonna either have to come up with out of pocket, or you're gonna have to lend them that additional 19,000. And this was making the assumption that we go ahead and lend them the full amount, okay? And so what we're saying is that we did do that, we make even more money in terms of profit on this property with basically selling it for what we have in it.
So the 22 and the 54 profit.
Yeah. Okay?
Now, if we, you were saying, so if I end up doing some of this, most likely if the bank finds out that you said you just.
Yeah, okay, let me also back up a little bit. Lenders need not always be banks. Lenders can be an individual.
Yeah.
You know, there are plenty of folks out there that own their properties free and clear, especially commercial properties. I mean, I've probably gotten financing from owners of commercial properties more often than I've got bank financing, because I can get more favorable terms with basically the owner of the property that's owned it maybe since 1950, you know. And so don't always think of a lender as being a traditional bank. Think of it as, it could just very well be the owner of the property that has owned it for many years, and then they're willing to, in essence, give you owner financing on the property, and then you can turn around and then potentially sublease or offer the property to someone else.
Kind of better for the owner for tax reasons, right? I mean, they're not taking a lump sum.
Exactly. It basically can be viewed as more as an investment or an installment sale contract. Because they can pay the profits on a year-to-year basis as opposed to a one lump sum sort of capital gain. Okay? But we're going to save that for the investments course. Okay? More of a tax thing. All right? Other questions? Make sense? Nice warm fuzzies? No? No warm fuzzy for you? No? Okay. All right. Let's move forward. Okay. Right. I think, maybe, don't get too excited. Yep, no, I think you can actually do all of these based on what we've done. All right. So, all right, last quiz of the day.
What's a corporate rate? What's a corporate rate?
What?
Teaser rate?
Yep, we went over them.
Corporate rate.
Prepayments and lockouts?
Yep, we talked about that earlier today.
Oh, that was like earlier.
Okay.
Prepayments and lockouts.
Okay, books away, time for the quiz, all right?
Do we go with corporate rate?
I'm sorry?
Do we go with the corporate rate?
What about the corporate rate?
Do we go over it?
Composite rate.
Composite rate.
Yeah, that was
You gonna sleep during that one?
Corporate rate was that much.
Okay, here we go.
We don't need any of that right now.
Are we not talking about?
I know.
We already did.
Yeah, corporate rate.
That's a load shot.
The loan shark.
Last one of the day, man.
All right, let's go.